Hello and welcome to the Tree Diaries. As you can see, I am back in my shed down in really hot Devon after returning from our month-long adventure up to the Highlands and up to Wales. There's nothing quite like returning home after an adventure, is there? And so yes, there's been lots of processing and letting that adventure all sink in and swim through so that we as a family can find the growth and some direction from that. But welcome to today's video. Welcome to today's chapter where we are going to be discussing the age-old question of what came first, the chicken or the egg. And within that, we're also going to be delving into the impact of the egg on our female reproductive systems, because as we know as women, the functioning of our reproductive systems is something that has a major impact on our whole lives. So today we're going to delve in and explore some of this, but it's scorching hot in the UK, and our heat's never that great, is it? It's never the nicest, warmest heat to sit around in. And it's a busy day here in the local area. There's people having fires, there's someone over the road who's working, doing drilling work. It's also the half term, so there's likely children going to be running around, probably postmen coming to deliver. So we'll see how we get on, because I have this vision of today's chapter ready to bring you all sat up in my head. But there's always that slight sense of feeling before you start that, am I going to be able to deliver it in the way that brings sense and clarity and vision? Am I going to be able to bring it from my mind to you in a way that actually makes any sense? But let's see, shall we? Let us see. Let's bring you a bit closer. Bring you a bit closer. There we go. So, it's a common theme when I speak with women, the challenges in their family homes, the challenging dynamics between the man, the woman, the partners, the masculine, the feminine. And it always seems to niggle around very similar topics, similar themes. So let's today just see if we can explore this topic in a way that may help to bring some sense and some clarity to your world, what you might be experiencing in your home, within yourself, within your soul, and within your reproductive systems inside. And it's an interesting question, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Because that question brings a very distinct vision, picture, and words to the question that it's asking. But being a visual thinking, dyslexic mind, I quite often like to remove words from the equation and look at the vision of what's being asked instead. So let's do that today, shall we? Let's look at the egg. Let's look at the egg in its most simplest form. The egg has 3 layers, 3 very distinct parts to it. It has that outer protective shield that encompasses the egg 360 degrees, every tiny millimetre, every square space of its external being, the egg is held safe by that protective shield and shell. Inside the egg is a white fluid consistency that changes in its texture, that's mobile, that's moving, that's fluid, all of it encompassing and shielding and moving around the yolk that sits at the center. And those three layers of the yolk, the fluid, white energy, and that protective shield and shell, has a purpose. Its purpose is simple. It is to protect the next generation so that it can grow and thrive and begin its life on Earth. And so let's cross that analogy over to our families, or to mammals, or insects, or beings, creatures on Mother Earth. Each thread, each family line that moves down through, they all live with this same metaphor of the egg, of a shield, a protective layer that sits around the whole of the outside. A masculine, protective, male layer, shield, shell, protection that sits around the outside of the family home. Within inside that shield of the male is a fluid energy that shifts and changes according to the temperatures, the dynamics, the environments that it's in. But that white fluid energy of the feminine essence is free to move wherever it chooses and wherever it needs to ensure that it's protecting the next generation or the children that's inside that sanctuary. So the egg as a metaphor matches our homes, and not just our homes, but our family's generation too. So we can look at it on many layers. We can look at it with the yolk of the next generation, the children, the fluidity of the feminine, the sisterhood that keeps, that holds the sanctuary and ensures the growth and the healthy development of the next generation is safe. And that masculine shield protection that sits on the outside. This sits in a multi-generational layer too of our grandparents who hold that cover and shield over the parents who are in the middle, working through the energy of parenting, keeping the children protected inside. So the metaphor of the egg follows through life in many ways. But each of them has their role. The yolk doesn't try to become the white fluid movement, changing energy of the feminine. There's just a van, I think, reversing up the lane. Beep, beep, beep. I hope it's not the big delivery truck, because that will just come and sit right next to me here. The yolk doesn't try to act and be the white fluid of life, and the white fluid doesn't try to become the shell. And the shell doesn't step away from its role of protecting what's inside its sanctuary. They all know their roles and their purpose in life, and they hold that firm. If that shell tries to put too much pressure on the inside, it cracks implodes under its own strength. It breaks. That shell always allows a pocket of breath, of air inside its sanctuary, so the fluidity of the feminine energy can move freely without being constricted or held too tight. If the feminine energy puts too much pressure onto the shell, it cracks and it breaks. And just like the egg, if our family homes, if that structure, that layered protection that runs through the core of life is not there and broken, then the white spills, the yolk dries, and the next generation is gone. The masculine, the protective shell, doesn't step away from its role and disappear. It doesn't take a piece of it and go off into the distance to try and protect it from afar. It doesn't take another piece and disappear over there to try and gather more protection over there. It knows its role. The shell holds space and keeps the next generation in the family home safe. It doesn't leave the whites of the egg with its thin shield exposed to the whole world. It keeps what's happening inside safe, hidden away, tucked behind its gentle, protective shell. When you cross this over and look at your own family home, your generational home, do you feel that protective shell sat around you so you are free to move in your home and protect the next generation and your young? Do you see that same shell through the generations of the grandparents holding and buffering the eggs? And every layer that you look at life, you can bring this metaphor of egg to life. Let's look at this on a slightly deeper layer. Because as women, we carry the yolk, the next generation of life, safely tucked inside our ovaries, waiting for that masculine protection to arrive. Just waiting to see if there's a delivery. I can hear all the trucks coming up the lane. Like I say, it's a busy day today. Hi, Jessie. Hi. Hello, baby girl. Hello. I know, it's hot, isn't it? You go and lie down in the shade. It's so scorching. I'm not a sun worshipper. I'd much rather the temperatures 19 degrees. I'm happy with that. Anything more, I start to suffer a little bit. Not designed for warm countries or heat. Anyway, where were we? We were discussing how, as the feminine, we carry this next yolk safely tucked in our ovaries. And we can bring this same analogy to our monthly cycle too. When, as women, we ovulate, we send out our white fluid to call in the male. When we ovulate, we are open and we are ready to receive, through choice, who and which male we invite into our space. And this is a process that happens across all of nature. When the woman is ovulating and her white fluid comes from the ovary down the fallopian tubes in through the womb in the uterus and is calling and ready to receive, that is when the call of the female is sent out and the choice of the male is there. Who she allows to enter into her space. And so the process of reproduction begins, and then the male energy comes up through into the feminine space. And that white fluid that sits around the yolk then sits waiting patiently for a masculine energy to approach. And when the right frequency is found, when the right connection is there, when safety is grounded, she chooses which masculine energy to enter into her space. Once this process is chosen and the gates are closed, together, then they build the sanctuary and the safety of the home. The masculine energy forming that shield and that shell around the white fluid to keep the yolk and the next generation safe. And then this fertilized egg moves down the fallopian tubes and enters the womb space of life. And this is where their choice and the truth of their decision is found, where they're able to form a safe, whole sanctuary so that the masculine had enough strength, gentle strength, without crushing the inside, enough gentle strength to embed into the womb and allow roots to form and grow inside. Or together, were they not able to hold the sanctuary safe? And does it bleed and wash away? And so at every layer of life, this choice, this process, this collision of the masculine and feminine is evident. When the female essence and fluidity is ready to receive, there is a choice who she allows into her sanctuary. Only then does she see the truth of the decision she's made. Did she choose a masculine who could hold gently and safely in its whole entirety, with enough strength to build roots so that the next generation can thrive? And so we come back to the question that we asked at the very start. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? And when you remove the words from this question and instead you look at the picture instead, the question and the words can no longer be what came first, the chicken or the egg. It has to be what came first, the man or the woman, the masculine or the feminine energy. And the answer to that question is that the masculine and the feminine have to, on every layer of life, arrive and come at exactly the same time. One entering and one receiving. And this is the epitome of life on earth. The egg is the result of the masculine and the feminine colliding and creating that strong, protective shell. Just like in nature, though, there are many spaces where we can see the dysfunction that our structures and our societies are causing to the foundation of the egg. Just look at the factory hens. Look how thin and weak and fragile their shells are becoming, because they are not living in safety, in sanctuary, through choice. And we can see the impact of this in the female form, how this fractured process is impacting the reproductive systems of the female. The struggles with reproduction, the struggles with our monthly cycle, that all connect to this invitation of life, of calling in the masculine energy into the feminine. So we're not going to cross over to the world data today. Instead, we're going to cross over to our reproductive data and look at the impact that it's having on us as females to have our choices removed and to have this organic, innate process that is the epitome of life on earth, of the masculine and the feminine coming together through choice and allowing in safety and connection the impact this is having on our female form and our reproduction of life. So let's just bring in what's actually happening. So we're just going to look at the ways in which the medical world is diagnosing the issues that we're having with our reproduction, and then look at the energetic way in which these issues can actually be manifesting and happening. Now, again, we're crossing over to medical terms and medical words now, so I'm going to struggle with saying them because that's just the way it goes. So let's bring you in, because I'm going to sit back while I do this and read. Ugh. So the first one that we're going to look at is with some women experience a lot of pain during sex. And there is a medical term for this, and it is called vaginismus. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but if you experience this, you don't need to know the name. You know what it means and you know what it is. It's an involuntary and painful tightening of the pelvic floor muscles upon attempted penetration. And there is a word for this chronic, painful intercourse, which I can't even pronounce. Dysphorunia, maybe like something like that. My child's just popped his head round and then run off. Yes, you can pop on a pizza, love. He's probably thinking, what the hell is she going on about? She's talking about painful sex in there. There are terms and medical terms for painful intercourse. And when those pelvic floor muscles tighten, involuntary, during sex. Let's look at what the energetic translation of this could be. This is your physical fortress locking its gates. When the mind has been coerced into compliance, but the soul feels zero safety, the body overrides the intellect. The body takes control to bring in protection to your soul. It physically blocks the entrance to protect the sacred yoke from the predator. It is the body screaming an absolute, unyielding no when the voice of the feminine has been silenced. If this is something you experience, do you recognize this within yourself? Now, endometriosis and another one called adenomyosis. No, I'm not saying that right, sorry. Why do I give them such crazy names? Honestly, for us dyslexics who find that kind of reading difficult. But we know what they mean. Let's look at what these words, medical terms, the medical definitions mean. Endometriosis occurs when the tissue of the womb, it's a unique cellular structure that we have in our womb space. It's very unique to the rest of the body. When this tissue and the lining of the womb migrates and grows outside of the uterus, on the ovaries, the bowels, the pelvis, and anywhere else in that region, it causes pain, agonizing pain, crippling pain, and chronic internal bleeding, which is the purpose of these cells, is to be the ones that flash the womb space ready for the next yoke, feminine energy and masculine protection to embed in. So what could the energetic translation of this medical term actually be? This is the migration of grief. We know that our womb spaces hold grief. When the natural sanctuary of the womb is chronically compromised by a toxic, dominant, or false connection, the tissue designed to nurture life becomes displaced in our body. It literally migrates to evacuate and hide and move away from this false connection that it's experiencing in that reproductive function and sexual experience of life. It nests into other parts of the body, causing internal weeping and inflammation, because the central sanctuary has been hijacked instead. So that's your uterus, the pelvic floor, and the womb lining. Let's look at polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS. This is something many women suffer with. And the medical definition is this: a hormonal disorder where the ovaries develop numerous small collections of fluid, cysts, and fail to regularly release the yolk and the egg. Now let's look at the energetic translation of this. The stagnation of potential. When this area of your body suffers and starts to hold, it begins to stagnate. The female anatomy ovulates as a natural, creative expression of life, desire, and sovereignty. When a woman is trapped in a multi-year cycle of sexual coercion, of emotional suppression, her body pauses the release. It suppresses and holds on to that creative life force instead. The fluid cell the fluid cells freeze and hold and stagnate, hardening into cysts, literally holding on to the unexpressed, stagnant creative life force because it has nowhere safe to flow. You can see into this, can't you, when we look at that egg and that feminine energy and that protective layer and how that translates into our experiences in life. It makes sense on an energetic level. You can see it and feel it inside. Let's look at fibroids and polyps. The medical definition is a non-cancerous growth of muscle and tissue that develop inside or on the walls of the uterus, often causing extreme heavy, prolonged and clotting periods. What's the energetic translation of fibroids and polyps? This is the physical calcification of swallowed, held in, stuck, trapped trauma. Dense, heavy pockets and blockages left behind by years of living in dense and heavy environments and energy. The womb begins to grow physical barriers within its walls, dense knots of tissue that act as a physical shield or monuments of the stagnation of your flow. Now, moving on, cervical dysplasia, abnormal smears. The medical definition of this is that it's the developmental of abnormal cells on the surface of the cervix, frequently triggered by chronic high stress and immune system suppression in the pelvic region. So the energetic translation of this is it's the erosion of your gateway, these abnormal cells. It's the erosion of the protection of your gateway. The cervix is our literal border control between the outside world and our inner sanctuary. When that border is continuously crossed through dominance, coercion, or duty sex, the cellular structure at the gateway begins to distort and lose its healthy, natural blueprint. Let's move on. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder, PMDD. This is a debilitating condition. The medical terminology and the medical definition of this is it's a severe debilitating extension of PMS that causes extreme emotional distress, rage, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, physical pain for 2 weeks leading up to menstruation. Let's look at the energetic translation of this instead. This is the monthly breaking of the leaf. During ovulation, the body is reaching its highest peak of feminine power, creativity, flow, and hope. When that peak of ovulation is met with a complete disconnection to self, loneliness, or a partner who only values the body as a utility, the drop in hormones acts as a chemical truth serum. You are finally seeing the truth of your life, the rage, the nausea, and the absolute intolerance that you are suppressing for the weeks leading up to ovulation is finally released. You can no longer keep the peace and suppress what you're experiencing in your external world. It explodes from you. You have no control. And you can no longer hold the lie of your life. Now, the last one we're going to look at is early menopause. What's the medical definition of early menopause? The depletion of ovarian function and the permanent cessation of menstrual cycles before the age of 40, accompanied by a sudden drop in estrogen. And what's the medical definition of this? What's the energetic translation of this? The permanent closing of the shop. The environment has been so toxic, so damaging, that the shop simply closes its door. When a woman has spent decades living under the constant, low-grade threat of an unstable, masculine environment, constantly walking on eggshells, balancing a partner's anger and rage, sexual desires, managing the survival of the house completely on her own without that gentle, protective layer holding space. Her nervous system burns out. The body realizes that it is unsafe to ever bring life or creative fluid and energy into that sanctuary or space. And to protect the woman from further depletion of her energy, the system completely shuts and cuts the power off at the grid to the reproductive system and organs, forcing the woman into an early crone and winter of her life, because the environment refused to provide a safe spring and summer for her to grow and thrive in. How much of that do you recognize and see in yourself with your own issues and struggles with your own reproduction and your own reproductive organs and your fluidity and flow? Western medicine tells us that the disease comes first and the emotional conflict comes secondary. It treats our bodies like a machine. But today, I'm asking you, what came first? The chicken or the egg? When you look at that list, the vaginismus, if that's how you pronounce it, the endometriosis, the PCOS, the fibroids, the PMD, the early menopause, these are not random malfunctions. These are the systems breaking, the metaphor and the egg of life. They are the tally of a woman being entered through dominance, coercion, and survival without the safety, the connection, and the invitation of life. Early menopause is not just your ovaries or your body failing. It is a brilliant biological system looking at the chaos in your life, the lies, the suppression in your environment, and choosing to permanently lock the doors to protect your remaining life force from being drained. Your body isn't defective. It's protesting and protecting you at the core. Now, we have spent far too long on earth learning the language of men. As women, we have become well versed in the language of men. It's now time for us to learn the language of women and allow the feminine fluidity and matriarchal energy to flow freely with choice and invitation down through our family homes and our generations instead. Through safety, through choice, through invitation to enter into our sacred space where we hold the next generation safe. The eggs we hold are the essence of life on earth. And the choices that we make as to which masculine energy we allow to enter our space, our home, our sanctuary, our wombs. This is our way of choosing the right protection, the right masculine energy that holds the space for the golden thread and the golden yoke of life. I can see that I've been chatting for 40 minutes. This topic is important and powerful because what sits at the heart of it all is something that every single one of us is navigating in our homes, in our hearts, in our womb spaces, in our reproductive organs, with our children, with our generational homes. It's something that we're all navigating. But we cannot see what it is that's missing if you have never felt the wholeness of that protective egg in your home or your generational home. If you've never known what that means or what that feels like or what the experience of that is in its wholeness, then there's no vision of what it should be like in our homes. And so just like healing, we grow when we change our perspective and we learn to look at life from a slightly different angle. And so that question of what comes first, the chicken or the egg, when we look at it from a different way, we see the truth of the question and what it actually means. And that is that the egg is the essence of life. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that I've been able to bring this to you in a way that brings sense, clarity, and peace to your mind, and maybe some strength in knowing what you're feeling and thinking are right, so that you can begin to put the protective layers in for your feminine essence and that matriarchal golden thread of life. Thank you. I shall see you next week. Bye.